Washington, this is VOA News. I'm Ray Kouguell reporting. U.S. criticizes Israel over Iran. Secretary of State John Kerry says Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is wrong in his judgment of nuclear talks with Iran. Prime Minister Netanyahu told fellow Likud party members Wednesday that by making concessions to the Iranians, the United States and its partners have given up on their commitment to keep Iran from being able to build a nuclear weapon. Secretary Kerry told a congressional hearing that what has been accomplished so far in talks at Tehran has actually made Israel safer by stopping Iran from advancing its nuclear program. He said critics of the ongoing talks with Iran, including Mr. Netanyahu, may not know what they are talking about. U.S. authorities arrested 3 men Wednesday on charges of plotting to support the Islamic State in Syria and to kill President Barack Obama, police, and FBI agents in the U.S. Officials say all 3 were living in New York, although 2 of them were identified as Uzbekistan nationals and the 3rd a citizen of Kazakhstan. Amnesty International says world governments fail to protect civilians from violence by states and armed groups. In its latest annual report, the human rights organization calls a global response shameful and ineffective. Amnesty International Advocacy Director Steve Crawford says one of the most striking failures of 2014 was abuse of the veto by UN Security Council members.
This is if you like, a lose-lose situation. The civilians of the world are suffering because of this cozy deal that was cooked up by the powerful members of the Security Council so many years ago.
Amnesty International Steve Crawford. Amnesty is urging the 5 permanent member states to give up their right to veto action in cases where genocide and other mass killings are being committed. This is VOA News. Russian President Vladimir Putin again warned that Moscow will cut natural gas supplies to Ukraine if Kiev fails to pay in advance for future deliveries. Mr. Putin's threat Wednesday came as a shaky truce between pro-Russian rebels and Ukrainian forces in eastern Ukraine showed signs of taking hold. Ukraine reported no deaths from hostile fire for the first time since an internationally brokered ceasefire was announced on February 12th. The French satirical weekly Charlie Hebdo is back on the newsstands. It's been 6 weeks since it was targeted by Islamist terrorist attacks. Lisa Bryant has more.
Charlie Hebdo is back to business. That is, of a jihadist dog, an enraged pope, and animal caricatures of French far-right leader Marine Le Pen and former President Nicolas Sarkozy can be considered business as usual. They're featured on the cover of Charlie Hebdo's new issue, which hit the newsstands on Wednesday. Speaking on French radio, cartoonist Luz, who designed the cover, says there is a joyous side to it. Luz, whose real name is Renard Luzier, said he wanted to draw the return of joyous criticism that Charlie Hebdo is known for, and not to be obsessed by what the newspaper has experienced. Lisa Bryant for VOA News, Paris.
The Somali government is welcoming the nomination of a new U.S. ambassador to Somalia, the first since 1991. VOA's Gabe Joslow has details.
Somali Prime Minister Omar Abdirashid Ali Shamarka says the nomination of Catherine Denani represents a very positive moment in relations with the United States. Speaking to VOA by phone from Mogadishu, the Prime Minister's office spokesman, Ridwan Haji, said the timing of the ambassador nomination is particularly good, as the country seeks to cement political reforms outlined in a policy plan known as Vision 2016. If approved by the Senate, Denani will be the first U.S. ambassador to the country since the ousting of former dictator Siad Barre plunged the country into civil war. She would replace a U.S. special representative who acts as the current envoy to Somalia, operating out of Nairobi, Kenya. Gabe Joselo, VOA News, Nairobi.
A spokesman for Nigeria's government rejected reports that President Goodluck Jonathan's administration has hired white mercenaries in the ongoing military offensive against the Islamist militant group Boko Haram. The U.S. Senate broke a political deadlock that threatens funding for the Department of Homeland Security, the government agency that patrols the country's borders and airports against possible terrorists. Senators voted 98-2 Wednesday to debate and vote on a so-called clean funding bill for the department, one without any other issues attached to it. The House of Representatives passed a Homeland Security bill several weeks ago, but it included provisions banning funding for the president's executive order. I'm Ray Kouguell in Washington.
That's the latest world news from VOA.